Let's look at how to make a random name generator in Unity. We're going to want a canvas, so if we head onto UI and click canvas, we'll leave the name as is. However, we're going to go to the canvas scaler. Now this is a personal preference, but I like to change this to scale with screen size, and the reference resolution I am using is 1600 by 900. And I'm also going to match the width or height with a value of 0.5, so they're even. The next thing I'm going to do is right click the canvas. I'm going to create another UI element, and this is going to be an image. Now I'm going to name this as our background. I'm going to then drag this to each corner of my canvas, and then I'm going to change the color to a soft blue. The next thing I'm going to do is right click canvas yet again, go to UI elements, and I'm going to go to text-text mesh pro. It's going to ask me to import TMP Essentials, so we're going to do that. And once you've done that, we can close this menu. Now with our text here, I'm going to change the position to 175. I'll change the width to 1300, and I will change the height to 125. Now I'm also going to change down here where it says alignment to the middle center. And I'm also going to change the font size to 50. On top of this, I'm going to make it bold, and then I'm going to go to the vertex color, and I'm going to make it sort of transparent. Finally, let's make the text say generate new name. Once we've done that, we're going to right click the canvas, we're going to create a new UI element, and this is going to be an image as well, but this time we're going to call it adjective. Now this is going to be the container where our adjective is shown, as our name generator will of course generate a random adjective and a random noun, and then it will combine them together to create a username. The width for our adjective is going to want to be 300, and we're going to leave the height as 100. Now for the position on the X, I'm going to change that to negative 155, and then for the position on the Y, I'll change that to 100. Now I'm going to go down to where the image is, and I'm just going to change this to black, and then have the alpha down to about 50. On top of this, I'm then going to add a component, and we're going to add a rect mask 2D. Under the adjective image that we've created, I'm going to create yet another image, and this is going to of course be done through UI image, and this is going to be called adj container. So this is where all 10 adjectives are going to be sort of stored. So then when we generate a adjective or a username, it will go through a list sort of like it's rolling. So for this, I'm going to have the position on the y-axis to 450, I'm going to have the width as 300 because that's the same as the adjective container, and the height is going to be 1000 to fit them all. Now I'm not going to touch any other settings here, the only thing I will do is go to the color, and I will make this completely transparent. The next thing I'm going to do is go to the adjective in the hierarchy, I'm going to click Ctrl C and then Ctrl V, and that will create adjective brackets 1. I'm going to rename this to noun. And then I'm going to change the position on the X to 155. I'm going to open it up, and I'm going to change the adjective container here to noun container. The next thing we're going to want to create is a button. So we're going to right click canvas, we'll go to UI, and we will do button-text mesh pro. Now this is going to be called name button. I'm going to change the width of this to 350 and the height to 75. I'm then going to go to where the source image is, and I'm actually going to click none. I'm going to change the color to a round, well, the same, but with the alpha is about 128. And then I'm going to open up, go to the text, and I'm going to click auto size, and then I'm going to type in capitals, generate. Now, on the auto size option, I'm going to change the max to about 50, and then I'm going to go to vertex color, and I'm going to make this white with an alpha of about 150. Now if I open this up, we have our name generator sort of template created. Now we need to do the actual function behind how it will work. To do that, I'm going to right click just in here in my hierarchy, and I'm going to create an empty. I'm going to call this name generator, and then I'm going to center the position just for ease of access, and then I'm going to add a component, and we're going to type in name generator. And then you'll see there's nothing there apart from new script, so let's do that. Now that we've created a new script, you'll see it is now in our assets folder, so let's double click that and open it. Now, in our program, we're not going to need the update function, and we're not going to need this comment here. We are going to, however, import 2 more libraries. So we're going to be using Unity Engine .ui, and we're also going to be using Text Mesh Pro, so that is TM Pro. Now this is of course all case sensitive, so make sure you've typed that correctly. We're next going to define quite a few variables. So first we're going to do serialize field, and we're going to have a private text asset, and then that's going to be called nouns. Now what we can do is copy this line, put it here, and then we'll have one for adjectives. Next, we're going to again want to do serialize field, and we will do a private, this time game object called nouns container. Once again, I'm going to copy this line, and I'm going to replace nouns for adjectives. Next, we're going to do another serialize field, private button, and this is going to be called our generate button. Now what this serialize field does is it keeps our variables private, however it allows us to access them in our sort of inspector. This means we can assign variables to it, but we can't edit these variables from other scripts as they are still private. The last two variables I'm going to define is a private text mesh pro UGUI, and this is going to be an array, and this is going to be called adjective text. And now I'm going to just duplicate this line once again and change adjective for noun. So the first thing we're going to want to do is create a new function. This is going to be a private void, and we're going to call it generate box. So in this we're going to want two parameters. We're going to want a game object called container, and then we're also going to want an integer which is going to be our value. In this we're going to want to instantiate a game object, and we're going to call this box, and this will be equal to a new game object, and we will call this box, and then in the squiggly brackets, making sure that we've got the $sign before, in the squiggly brackets we will do value, and then end it with a semicolon. We've got the $sign here, meaning anything we put in these squiggly brackets will actually be what the variable's holding and not the variable name. So say value was 0, this would be called box 0. So next we're going to want to do box.transform.parent, and we're going to have that equal to container.transform. And now our containers will of course be either adjective container or noun container. So this allows us to define 10 different sort of adjective boxes where we can put some text in to generate a random username. Next I'm going to do box.transform.localPosition, and then we're going to have that equal to a new vector3, and this is going to be 0, negative 450 plus, and then in brackets, value times 100, close brackets, 0. What this is going to do is it's going to make sure that the boxes are nicely formatted one on top of each other. This is because of course the boxes are 100 in height, and so if we times this by the value, each one will be on top of each other. The reason we're starting at negative 450 is because of course we offset our boxes to negative 450 in the inspector. The next line is going to be box.transform.localScale, and we're going to have this equal to new vector3, and we will just have this as 1 for each value. This is to make sure that the scale is correct, because sometimes when you instantiate, they can have scales of the child object, the parent object, it could be anything. So we just want to make sure that it is 1. Next, we're going to want to add a component. So we'll do box.addComponent, and we're going to want to add text mesh pro UGUI. This means we can add text to our boxes, which of course will be where we put the adjectives or nouns, the actual words. Next, we're going to want to do box.getComponent, and we're going to want to get this newly created text mesh pro UGUI, and we're going to want to enable word wrapping, and we're going to want this equal to false. This means if a word is too long to fit in the box, it will, instead of going to a new line, just go outside the box, which is what I want. However, you may not want this, so if you don't, you can always just take out this line. It won't affect the program too much. Finally, for this function, we're going to do another box.getComponent, and again, we're going to get text mesh pro UGUI, and this time we're going to get the alignment, and I'm going to do text alignment options dot center. Again, this is personal preference, but this will mean that the text is in the middle instead of to the left or to the right or up or down. So now that we've created this function, we can go back to our start function, which we left empty, and we can create a for loop. I'm going to do for integer I is equal to 0, where I is smaller than 10, I is going to increment by 1 each time. In this, I'm going to do generate box, and then here I will pass through nouns container, and I will also pass through I. And then going to again do generate box, but this time for the adjective container, and again I will pass through I. So what this is doing is it is going to call this 10 times, creating the boxes one on top of each other. Now you could edit the program slightly, change the value here to 20 or 30, 15, you know, you could have more adjectives and nouns generated each time, but if you do that, there will be some other areas you need to change in the program. Just take note of that. Finally, in this function, we're going to want to get our adjective text, and we're going to equal that to adjectives container dot get components in children. And now we need to make sure that we are doing the plural version, so it has to have an S on the end of component. And then in here, we're going to want to do text mesh pro GUI. And then end that with, of course, the brackets and the semicolon. Copy this line, and we're just going to do the same, but for our noun text. The next function we're going to create is a bit of a different one. We're actually going to create a numerator. Now, this is not specifically a function, however it does act the same. The only difference is we can actually manipulate time in it. To do this, we're going to want to do private, and then we'll do I enumerator, and then I'm going to call this animate roll, and then in this I'm going to want a float, and this is going to be our delay. I want a boolean, and this will be is final, and then we're going to want a game object, and this is going to be container. And then, of course, we will open it with the squiggly brackets. So in this, I'm going to yield return new, wait 4 seconds, real time, and then delay. This is because in the roll function, in the name generator we're creating, I'm going to want the nouns to come back down a little bit after the adjectives. This just creates a nice sort of animation. You don't have to have this, but it is, again, a personal preference which I will implement. So in this, we're going to want to do a for loop. In this, we're going to want an integer I, and this is going to be equal to 0. We're going to do where I is smaller than or equal to 225. Now, this value will be different if you use a different value for the for loop here. You'll have to calculate that yourself. And then we will just increment I by 1 each time. We're going to want to do our container.transform.local position. And we're going to want this equal to a new vector3, and this is going to be container.transform.localPosition.x, container.transform.localPosition.y minus 4f, and then end that with a semicolon. On the next line, I'm going to yield return new, wait 4 seconds, real time again, and then I'm going to do 0.005f, and then I'm going to end that with a semicolon. Now the final thing I'm going to do is create an if statement, and I'm going to do if is final, generate button dot interactable equals to true. Now this will come clearer later, however, we're going to make it so when you start generating the username, the button becomes inactive. This will prevent the user from sort of breaking the system. And then once it's completed, we want the button to then be active again so they can generate a new name. Alternatively, if you don't want them to be able to generate another name, you can completely remove this and they will never be able to generate a new name. Now that we've created the animate roll function, we're going to create one final function before we do the main one. So in this, we're going to actually have it as a private string, and this is going to be called return word. In this, we're going to pass through a text asset, and this is just going to be called file. Now what this function is going to do is it's going to return a word for either our adjective or our noun, and this is going to happen by searching a file which we will create after we've created the script. So in this, we're going to want to first create an array of all the lines, and this will be done by file.text.split, and we will split it by \n. This is essentially new line. So we're going to split the text file by line, so each line will be in this array. The next line we're going to want is string line, and we're going to have this equal to lines, and then in square brackets, random.range, and then we will do in brackets 0, comma, lines.length minus 1, and then end that with a semicolon. Now what this is going to do is generate a random sort of number. It's going to pick that number in the file, and that line in that file will be assigned to this variable here, and that will be the word that we return. So we will simply do return line.substring 0, comma, line.length minus 1. Now the reason I'm minusing 1 from the length instead of just returning line is because the new line here will actually be passed through to our string, and that causes a lot of issues. So let's get on to the main sort of function in this script. We're going to do public void generate name. Now, this is going to be our only public function, and that's because the button is going to be calling this function here. First, let's sort of create a bit of code to reset our boxes for if this isn't the first time we're sort of generating a name. So we're going to do nouns container.transform.local position. We're going to have that equal to a new vector3, and we'll do that to nouns container.transform.local position.x, comma 450, because that is what I had it in the inspector as. I'm going to copy this line, and I will change nouns to adjectives container, and then in here to adjectives container as well. So that is all the resetting. So now I'm going to enter, and I'm going to do generate button dot interactable equals false. And now this is of course what I mentioned earlier. Next, I'm going to create another for loop, and this is going to be again integer I equals 0. I is smaller than 10 because we're using 10 up here. And then we will increment I by 1 each time. In this, we'll go into our array of adjective text, and we'll have the value as I, and we'll do dot text is equal to return word adjectives dot to upper. Now for the next line, we will do noun text dot text equals return word nouns dot to upper. Now what this is doing is of course using this sort of function here to get our word, and then it is making it all capital case, and that again is personal preference. You don't have to make it uppercase, but I am in this example. So now I'm also going to want to do a string, and we'll call this noun, and we'll have this equal to noun text number 9 dot text. So next we'll do string adjective, and we'll equal this to adjective text 9 dot text. So next we're going to sort of call the enumerator we created here, and to do that we want to do a start coroutine, and then in the coroutine we'll do animate role, and in this we're going to want to pass through the parameter 0 for the first one because we'll do adjectives first, false because it is the first one we're calling, not the final one we're calling, and then this is going to be adjective container because that's the one we're passing through, that's the container we want. And then we will do another coroutine on this line. Again, this will be animate role. This time I'm going to have a delay of 0.5f, which is of course 0.5 seconds. Then we will do true because this is the final sort of one we're generating. And then I am going to do nouns container, and then end that all with a semicolon. Finally, we're going to create a way to have our sort of username output. So to do this, we'll do string username output, and we're going to have this equal to $ quotations. And of course, the $ means we can put the squiggly brackets and variables in it. And so we want the adjective followed by the noun, and then finish that off. Now, of course, that's the ones we defined here. So just for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm going to output this into our console or our debug.log. So to do that, I'm literally just going to put our outputted username, and then we will do it as our username output. So that's the script done. So let's do some final things in our program. We're first going to want to go to name button. We're going to do on click, and then we will drag in the name generator here. we will go to name generator here, and then we will simply do generate name. Next, we'll go to name generator, and we need to assign these variables. So you're going to want to create a text file for your nouns and adjectives. However, I've already done that. All it is a file which has different, so for this one, nouns on different lines, and then the adjectives has different adjectives on different lines. It's up to you how many you do. It's completely your choice. Just make sure that each one is on a new line. So let's assign them to our name generator. We'll get nouns and we'll put that into nouns. We'll get adjectives, so we'll put that into adjectives. We will then get our adjective container, put that into adjective container. We'll get our noun container and put that into noun container. And then we will simply get our button and put that into our generate button. Let's hit save by Control S'ing and let's run and see if it works. If I now go into sort of the adjective container in our hierarchy, you can now see 10 boxes has been created from 0 to 9. That is a good sign. So let's click the generate button. And as you can see, it generated a name in a rolling fashion, and if we go to our console, you can see Faithful Squirrel has been added. If we generate a new name, we can see Tender Human was now created. That is how to create a random name generator in Unity.